Hey everyone, my name is Nick and welcome back to the channel. And in this video on the in-depth series of the new Thousand Sons 9th edition Codex, we're going to be taking a look specifically at the Legion Command options. Now this is a way of upgrading all of our Sorcerer characters, non-named specific, so Exalted, Regular Sorcerers, Sorcerers in Terminator Armour, Aspiring Sorcerers and Scarab Occult Terminator Sorcerers. So let's get straight into it. First up then is the options for Exalted Sorcerers only. The first one we have is called Rehati, where we have the ability to cast 1 extra power, and that's going to cost us 25 points with the privilege to upgrade one of our Exalted Sorcerers to that rank. Now what this does is allow us not to have to spend a command point on a stratagem called the Great Sorcerer, which allows us to manifest an extra power in that turn. Now given Exalted Sorcerers no 3 powers, including smite, so they get to pick 2 plus no smite. That allows them to cast all 3 in a single psychic phase. And for 25 points means we haven't got to burn that CP, as I mentioned. If that Exalted Sorcerer is also your Warlord and takes Lord of the Forbidden Law, that allows him to know an additional psychic power as well. So that does give you that added flexibility. If your Warlord is Magnus the Red, he just has access to all the powers. But if we ignore him for now and one of your Exalteds happens to be the Warlord, then we get that ability too. However, on the whole, you're either going to be running Magnus or you're going to be running Ahriman, and Ahriman will probably be your Warlord. But equally, there are ways to take additional Warlord traits with various stratagems, so it all does come into play. Next up for the Exalted Sorcerer options is the Paradigm of Change, and that basically gives us a full stat change with an additional wound and an additional attack for 15 points. And finally, for the Exalted Sorcerers, we get Dilettante, which allows us to take an extra relic for 35 points. Now that means we can take a free one and an extra relic on the same model. So you're not normally having to split your relics across multiple characters. We can actually take 2 relics for that extra 35 points. An expensive option, but there's some great relics in there to stack on a single model. Going down the ranks then to a Regular Sorcerer or a Terminator Sorcerer, we have Loyal Thrall, which means we can perform a psychic action in the psychic phase instead of 1 power. Now these guys get to cast 2 powers and deny 1 in the psychic phase, so they can still do an offensive or a buffing power at the same time as carrying out an action. Next up then is Witch Warrior, which allows us to re-roll the Mortal Wound output. So if you cast Smite, for example, or a Witchfire Psychic power that inflicts mortal wounds on a dice roll, so Smite, for example, is D3, or if you're rolling against a unit where you get to do D6, for example, you can re-roll one of the dice to determine the number of mortal wounds inflicted. Now, if anyone's watched my channel Bat Reps before, D3 always means 1. That's just the way my dice roll. So something like this is going to be very handy for me that never relies on my D3 rolls to score me anything more than a 1. So yeah, especially now that there's no such thing as baby smite as well, although regular sorcerers don't have to worry about that, but we'll get to that at another point. This is quite a handy one if you're looking, if you've got a 2 wound model, you're outputting mortal wounds, you roll that 1 for that smite power, and you're really annoyed because there's still that 1 wound left. You get to re-roll and give you that extra chance of taking that unit out. And finally, for the Sorcerers and Terminator Sorcerers, we have a stat increase option with the Battle Psych upgrade, and that gives us a flat ballistic skill and weapon skill of 2+, and an increase on the attacks to give us 5 attacks, all for 10 points. Finally, for our Legion Command upgrades on our Aspiring Sorcerers in our Rubric squads and our Scarab Sorcerers in the Terminator squads, we have Ardent Automata, which allows us to shoot whilst performing an action for 20 points. The next one we have is Protégé, which allows us to know 1 additional psychic power from any discipline it has access to. And then finally, the Rites of Coalescence, which in our command phase, another member in that squad gets to regain all its lost wounds. So it's a very healing type power for 15 points. All 3 of these are really good utility abilities for our Aspiring and Scarab Sorcerers, who traditionally, under the old Codex, would normally put out 1 mortal wound with a baby smite, and that's pretty much what most people would have done with them. This really does add a little bit of extra utility, especially around some of these objectives. That Ardent Automata one, for me, really does stand out. as does Rites of Coalescence if you're running a very large unit of Terminators. So which are my favourite ones out of the ones that we've seen so far? Now, I really do like Rehati, the ability to cast that extra psychic power for one of our Exalted Sorcerers. I also like Dilettante for the ability to have an additional relic. That, although it is quite an expensive one, but being able to stack relics on a single figure is actually not a bad thing. I also like Loyal Thrall, the ability to perform a psychic action in its psychic phase instead of attempting to manifest one psychic power. Anything that can buff your ability to score in the primary and secondary objectives, I think, is quite critical for such a finesse style army, and that's the way you're going to rack up points, and that's the way you're going to win games on the whole. So I tend to favour those types of ability, which is why I also like Ardent Automata. If this model is performing an action, that can shoot whilst that action is going on without failing. Those are probably my favourite ones out of the lot. At this stage of looking through the codex, it's probably going to depend on your army build on the whole, but those are the ones I would tend to look at. There's plenty of point options in here. If you find yourself building your list and you've got those spare points, take a serious look at these Legion command options. You know, if you've got that spare 10 points and you're only going to take Battle Psyker, if you build your list around some of these Legion commands, you might drop a couple of models to be able to take them because they are potentially game-changing. So there we go, folks. That is my review of the Legion command for the Thousand Sons Codex. Picked out a few of my favourites that are standing out so far from my initial read, and just sort of generally looking around online, seeing what other list builds are going on as well. I think these are the ones that are standing out at this stage. Obviously, time will tell. It might be quite opposition determined as well, so there could be some variation in this, but I think those are potentially the most powerful ones in regular matched play. But of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what Legion command options you'll be looking at when you build your Thousand Sons army lists, and that's what the comment section below is all about. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I shall see you all on the next video.